More evidence today of increasing weakness in the housing market. U.S. home prices may fall for the first time in 13 years, according to the National Association of Realtors. Professor Paul Krugman recently said the long-feared housing bust has arrived. Paul Krugman is professor of economics and international affairs at Princeton University and also a New York Times columnist. He joins us now in the studio. Great to have you here tonight.
Good to be on.
Well, it seems that every time we get some data about housing, it is not particularly good news. Are we now looking at a housing cycle that is something we have not seen in decades?
I think we're looking at a housing cycle we've never seen. I mean, you just look at a chart of real housing prices, and the run-up since 2000 is completely unprecedented in history. It's bigger than the run-up in, you had isolated housing bubbles, in the late 1980s in Southern California. This time we've got a national bubble that's bigger than what we had in the most bubblicious regions of the country and at the worst. So this looks like, if history is any guide, housing prices have got a long way to fall, and the housing industry is going to go through a long drought.
Now, you've recently raised concerns about a possible recession based on what we're seeing with the housing market if there are other factors in place. Tell us how worried you are about the overall effects of this.
Well, if you actually do the numbers, you say, how big could this be on housing, plus the effect on consumers who've been, basically using their houses as an ATM and can't do that anymore, you're looking at a hit to the economy that is as big as what happened with the stock market crash at the end of the 90s, as big as the tech bust. What we don't know is how fast it comes on, and we don't know whether other things will, business investment will take its place. But you've got to say it's well in the range where a serious slowdown is likely, and an actual recession is certainly not outlandish. So this is scary.
What worries you most about the economy? Is it the housing situation?
Well, yes, plus there's one other shoe that hasn't dropped, and we hope doesn't drop, which is the U.S. has this enormous trade deficit. We've been dependent upon large inflows of money from foreigners who keep on thinking that this is a great place to invest. If we should have a kind of loss of foreign investors' confidence on top of the housing bubble bursting, then we could be talking about significantly worse.
How worse?
I mean, I don't have a hard time sitting there with a spreadsheet and playing with numbers. I don't have a hard time getting an unemployment rate that rises above 6% from here. The worst it could possibly be, we never know how bad it could possibly be. I mean, we're not Argentina. That's the good news, right?
Exactly.
Our foreign debt is in dollars. That's the ultimate safety valve. But it could be pretty bad.
You write a lot about the economy. You have a lot of criticism for the Bush administration. Yeah. Now, the administration will say, listen, we might worry about what's happening with unemployment in the future, but right now it's at a 5-year low, and there are factors showing strength in the economy. Do you give the administration credit for any positives in the economy?
Oh, if you compare with nothing at all, the tax cuts, even though I thought they were really badly constructed, may have added a little bit of demand. But if you ask the story, first of all, how good is the economy? It's not great.
Well, I mean, GDP growth has slowed down, but we're still...
Yeah, but, when they talk about, we've added 5.3 million jobs in the past 3 years, that's well below the average annual job growth in the Clinton years. So it's not a really exciting thing. And most people have not seen any income gains. I mean, the fact of the matter is, because inequality has been widening so much, most people are not gaining anything. And if you ask me, why did the economy finally start to show at least some life beginning in 2003, look at those housing charts. It's the housing boom that's behind everything, and I don't think the Bush administration, for better or for worse, had anything to do with that.
How big of an issue is the economy going to be in the midterm elections?
Well, people are feeling pretty sour, and if you ask them what they're feeling sour about, actually sort of the economy in Iraq top the list. So the economy is a clear negative. If it was really, if it felt like 1999 right now, people were feeling that sort of prosperous, then the Republicans would be in much better shape. As it is, it's working in the Democrats' favor.
All right. If we gave you the keys to the kingdom and said, fix the economy, do what you think needs to be done.
Okay. First thing, we need a plan to roll back some of those tax cuts, the high-end tax cuts, because we need the money. We need to do something to help middle class and lower income Americans. And the first place would be to start with some serious health insurance reform. I was actually a fan of Kerry's plan. in 2004. And if you had the money from a rollback of tax cuts, you could do that plan.
How about minimum wage?
Minimum wage, yes. I mean, minimum wage is at its lowest real level in 50 years. There's no reason for that.
Adjusted for inflation is what you're referring to.
Right. And it's, you know, it's not a perfect policy to help the low-wage people, but it's something, and we can do it, and the costs are almost certainly quite low. And then we should probably have a contingency plan in case this recession materializes, and we might be needing to talk about some pump priming, but those are the things I would definitely do.
Have a couple seconds left. How do you feel about Mr. Paulson?
Hard to say. I mean, he's sounding more reasonable than the rest of the Bushies, which makes him sort of halfway between the Bushies and an actual reasonable person. You know, so far not so bad, but we haven't seen how he behaves when there's a real problem.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. We covered a lot of ground. Professor Krugman, great.